I didn't go to university. And that was a really defining point for me because I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't want to make that commitment. So I did go into the world of work quite early on, and I realised that I was a doer. Like that's how I best learn. And it's still very much what my businesses are about now. It's about supporting people and helping them be their best and do what they need to do. We obviously had an immense support from the local home birth team who are amazing, but I didn't need any intervention. There was no pain relief. Everything kind of went completely as I had hoped that it would.
You gave birth without pain relief?
I was like, well, hang on. If I've done that, I can start a business. I can do anything. And there was like this really naivety in the empowerment. I was like, I've created and birthed a human. I can do anything.
Hi everyone, you're listening to the Unrelenting Drive podcast, and before we get into today's episode, I just wanted to let you know I started this podcast because over the years I've had hundreds of the most inspiring conversations of my life with small business owners, and they really helped me grow and scale my own business and get my mindset right even when times were really tough. I wanted to capture those conversations and make them available to other small business owners who are following in my footsteps, and I've just got a small request. If you enjoy this episode, if you find it really inspiring, if you find it helps you in your own business, then please just like it and subscribe to our YouTube channel. The more subscribers we get, the more we can invest in making the podcast better. So enjoy the episode. Hi everyone, you're watching the Unrelenting Drive podcast, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Suzy Sanders from Alchemy VA and Suzy Sanders Coaching. Suzy, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast.
Oh, thank you for inviting me on. It's really great to be here.
It's great to have you here. And if you could start off by telling the audience what you actually do.
Oh, okay. Well, yes. So I do a lot of things. So I'm the founder of Alchemy Virtual Assistants, and we are the only family-run virtual assistant franchise in the UK. And over the past year, I've also been starting my other business, which is a coaching business. So very different, but very, very complementary in terms of purpose. So
amazing. Okay. And I'm really looking forward to getting into all of that a bit later in the podcast. But I think a really good starting point would just be to understand your background in terms of how you got into business. So what did you do in terms of like a qualification, or how did you start off in the world of work?
Ooh, in the world of work. Well, do you know what? I didn't go to university. And that was a really defining point for me because I didn't know what I wanted to do and I didn't want to make that commitment. So I did go into the world of work quite early on, and I realized that I was a doer. Like that's how I best learn. So I threw myself into a whole plethora of jobs, but to kind of skip to the birth of the business was very closely linked to the birth of my son. And I was working in a global recruitment company. I was executive assistant to the then chief HR officer. So my most recent employment was supporting C-suite execs in the capacity of a PA.
Okay.
And when I had my son, as all parents know, you can't plan for it and it changes everything. And I didn't adjust to motherhood very well at all. And when it came around to going back to work, I was given a great degree of flexibility, and I wanted to work as well as needing to, and I just did it. Just everything had shifted so much for me. It wasn't going to work. And I realized how much I was going through the motions, having had some time out with my son, and that's when I decided to start the first business. So I kind of came at it from I'm just going to do my PA stuff in a kind of freelance, supporting other businesses type capacity, and it all kind of snowballed from there.
So how long were you working before you had a kid?
Oh my goodness. I have no idea. I was in my job that company for about 5 or 6 years before Paul and I got married, and we'd always wanted a family. And and then all of a sudden it kind of happened, and then it shifted everything. And I've obviously since just got back from maternity leave for the second time as well. And having the contrast of employed maternity leave versus self-employed maternity leave, I mean, it's been a really contrasting experience in many ways.
It's contrasting a polite way of saying it's much better when you're employed.
Oh, well, I mean, for me and my experience, absolutely. But I caveat that because, I mean, we're all different, right? And I also second time round with a baby, I learned a lot the first time round. And, but yeah, I mean, scarier for sure, because there was so much more uncertainty. But there was also so much more flexibility and so much more, less pressure, yet more pressure. But for me, yeah, so much better this time round.
Amazing. Okay. And so it sounds like pretty much the first job you got after education, you were there for over 6 years then, really?
No, oh, no. I was in that job before I got before I started the business, but I had loads of jobs before then. I was a bit of a job hopper.
I mean, we got time if you want to.
Well, I mean, no, I did the whole getting a job in a bar thing.
Okay,
that was kind of I supported myself through college with that. Loved that camaraderie and the fun, and I'm guessing it's different now.
Actually, that's one of my biggest regrets, like never getting a job in a bar.
Really?
Yeah,
you should go and get a job in a bar.
When I was at doing my A-levels and stuff, I was like working as a lifeguard, and then like when I was at university, I joined the officer training course. I was in the Army Reserve for 3 years, so it was I never actually got to do the bar stuff or like a regular job. Like once I worked in a flooring tile factory for one summer, which was like the most mundane, boring job of my life, just moving flooring tiles from one production line to another production line for like 8 hours a day. But so yeah, it sounds like you got to experience the bar scene. That was good.
Yeah, and actually that's where I met my husband. We worked together behind the bar. That's where we first met.
What kind of was it a restaurant bar or was it?
Oh, it was a proper old man pub.
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
It was a proper old man pub. We had a really good team, and it was that work hard, play hard, and they were almost like a family. We were all similar age.
Did you grow up locally in Northampton?
Yeah. I'm Northampton born and bred.
Oh, amazing. Okay, but tell me about which pub it was later.
Okay.
We don't need to cover it right now. Or if whoever's watching this, they really want to find out, I'm sure they'll put it in the comments, and then maybe you can reply to them.
Yeah, I don't even know if it exists now.
Right, okay.
I'll find out.
It's cool. Yeah, it could be. Yeah. And then after you worked in a bar or a pub, like what did you do then?
Well, I do you know what I said earlier? I job hopped, and I did, because I realised, I know now I'm very multi-passionate and I need lots of different projects and things to keep me focused. And I had this kind of, I want all the experience, I want to gain experience doing different things, but I also have this kind of, I want to be the best at what I'm doing as well.
Yeah.
And that thread was there when I was younger, and I know, I started in a bar, but I ended up running pubs, and I was doing relief management, and that was kind of where I was like, oh, I love this, I'm going to get as high up as I can, then I'm going to go and do something else. And I had classic telesales jobs and office and admin jobs, and then I got my first kind of real job, if you like, for quite a small tech company, and I was in their marketing department, which consisted of 2 people.
Okay.
So again, I had a chance to just explore and get hands-on with so many different things. And that's when I was like, all my friends are kind of getting grown up, proper jobs. So that's when I started moving into the kind of more the PA role, and gaining lots of experience in that world. So
amazing. Okay. Yeah. And what was your first PA role like? Like, what kind of business was it?
Well, it was within, although I think most PAs that I know kind of fell into it. I know I did. And I think I was already doing a bit of a PA role just without the label. But my first kind of proper PA job was for the recruitment company. And I think I just loved it, because it's still very much what my businesses are about now. It's about supporting people and helping them be their best and do what they need to do. And it was a really interesting viewpoint to sit in a company when you're supporting a senior exec or somebody at a high level, to sit and be their kind of right hand. It's a really beautiful viewpoint to gain a lot of insights into business, but obviously it's a really trusted position as well. And that was all of those things that I kind of, when I started the virtual assistant business, that's the approach that I had. I assumed every virtual assistant had a kind of high level PA background. I soon learned that wasn't the case, but I think hands down best role I've ever done.
That's absolutely amazing. You know, one of the best jobs I ever had in finance was at a company called Facenda, and they produce like a quarter of this country's chicken. So like Costco, Asda, Lidl, Aldi. But it was a good role because it was in manufacturing. But I sort of sat with the sales team, so I was working with the sales team to help them to develop the pricing behind the actual products.
Yeah.
But I think the best thing about that role was just like you were saying, you were working with like an MD or the CEO, and I was working like in a little pod, but I was surrounded by the managing director, the sales director, the operations director, and the finance director, and like the amount I learned just listening to their conversations.
Yeah.
And that a lot of that is just, and also not just necessarily making decisions, like, you know, some of it isn't always transferable because chicken production, now we do business advisory and accounting, but actually a lot of it was transferable. But the key thing was, you know, how they maintained themselves, composed themselves, dealt with other people, treated each other.
Yeah.
And yeah, just seeing that, you know, how people behave at that high level. And then it kind of, I think that's probably one of the things that just pushed me ahead, like, you know, probably quite a few years in my career, because once you're surrounded by certain people, you try and up your game because you've got that imposter syndrome anyway. But then the other side is like, just as an average, you start behaving like them. And then by behaving like them, you start performing like them. That's arrogant of me to say that. I obviously wasn't performing
I know what you mean.
at that level, but it was so much further ahead than I would have been if I hadn't been in that environment.
Yeah. And it's funny, isn't it? My last employed job, the exec that I had the privilege of supporting, even now, I learned so much from him for many of the reasons that you've just said there. And even now I'm like, you know, I'm still like, oh, that's what that was about. And, you know, and you're right. Like, and I think that's important in business, isn't it? In having that awareness of what impact your support network has. It's not just, you know, there's a big focus on networking and for gaining business, but for me it's always been deeper than that. It's been about surrounding yourself with influential people who are speaking your language and able to support you in ways beyond just business. So yeah,
I guess, you're only an average of the 5 people you surround yourself by. I hear that a lot, and mathematically it doesn't always work because if you're like because what about the people at the bottom of the average? But then I'd throw in the caveat, like, you know, if you're in a diverse team, you're all good at different things, so you bring your average up to the person that's best at that particular thing, and then they're bringing their average up to the thing you're best at. But that's the way I look at it. But that's really amazing. So you got some really good like insights into managing a business just from like working with the right people in the right position. And then and how long were you doing that? Like employed as a VA? Sorry, not a VA.
I
executive
that was
assistant.
probably about 5 or 6 years. I think I was doing that, but then I naively was like, I think I was kind of working. I wasn't working virtually, but I was, because I was working in a corporate office environment. But my experience of being a PA, you are working independently anyway, and you have to be self-motivated, and nobody's going to be like, have you done that? Your job is to make sure that is done before anyone realizes it's not done, kind of thing. So I think I had always had that kind of, that environment really served me well when I switched to being a VA. So it didn't feel so much of a jump. But yeah, I was doing that for at least 5 years before I started the business.
Yeah. And so I know you kind of just covered it, but was there one defining thing that happened which really wanted to make you move and do your own thing?
Yeah. I mean, I said it was my son, but actually it was deeper than that because I think I've always had this kind of little entrepreneurial spark in my belly. You know, I was the kid that was trying to make pocket money, more pocket money. You know, I've always kind of had a bit of an entrepreneurial spark, and I think that's why I'd always had such an interest in doing lots of experiencing different things, because I was trying to find my thing. And but I think it was when I had my son, I did a lot of work on my mindset in preparation for birth. I don't know if you are aware of hypnobirthing. I think it's a lot more trendy now than it was.
I've heard of it. It's like, I'm just trying to, I don't really know what it is.
Well, I mean, if there's anyone listening that's an expert, please correct me.
Actually, sorry, can I guess what it is before you tell me?
Yes,
that'll be more fun.
That would be more fun.
Is it where you get hypnotized so you don't feel pain? Or hypnotized to deal with the pain?
Well, that's what like the name would suggest, I guess. And loosely, yeah, it's kind of, I think it's based on like NLP techniques. It's about kind of the mental preparation. It's not, and I took it, I just totally got it. I got it. And it empowered me to have the birth that I wanted. So I was totally calm and prepared, and I went into birth. I had my son at home. We obviously had an immense support from the local home birth team, who are amazing. But I didn't need any intervention. There was no pain relief. Everything kind of went completely as I had hoped that it would.
Wait,
because
you gave birth without pain relief?
Yeah, first time round. Yeah,
oh, right, okay,
first time round.
And
then it was the tools and the techniques. And for me, it was about hypnobirthing helped me realise that my body was built to birth, and that I had to get my own stuff out of the way so I could allow my body to birth. And
why did you want to give birth without the pain relief?
Well, I didn't want to. That wasn't the objective. But actually, once I kind of got into it, I realised that I could.
Is it like running a marathon or something, when people want to run a marathon?
I guess so.
It's like a personal objective.
Yeah, I guess so. And I wanted to birth naturally.
Yeah.
And I wasn't going in there like, oh, I'm going to do it without pain. It kind of unfolded that way.
Okay.
So I had this really kind of empowering moment, because I was like, okay, so my body has created this human being without me really having to think about it. I've been able to birth this human being. Like, I don't even know how to explain to somebody how you would give birth. Like, what? And then I just kind of was in this euphoria, kind of empowered state. Totally crashed out from that. I did experience postnatal depression, and I didn't adjust to motherhood very well at all. But I was like, well, hang on. If I've done that, I can start a business. I can do anything. And there was like this really naivety in the empowerment. I was like, I've created and birthed a human. I can do anything. So then I was like, that was it. I was like, let's give it a go. You know, I kind of felt like I'd hit rock bottom. I hadn't really got anything to lose. I hadn't been working. And, you know, what was the worst that could happen in starting a business? So that was definitely the catalyst. But that was also the start of a lot of my mindset work. Because I believe that success in business is mostly mindset.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. So, I mean, your franchise is called Alchemy VA, but was it always called that? Because I remember when I first met you years ago, like your business had a different name.
Yeah, well, I mean, I started just like, hi, I'm Suzy Sanders, I'm a VA. Okay. That's how I started, and it had evolved. But my husband's my business partner now, so when Paul joined the business, he was like, no, we've got to do something about this brand, because this is not like, this isn't you anymore. This is us, and we're gonna grow. So he had a big part in redefining the business, because we knew we wanted to scale. So we wanted, we kind of wanted to build a brand that we could.
Could you tell me about those early years when you first started out? Like, how did you go about getting your first client?
Do you know what? It's so strange, because it feels like a different lifetime ago.
How long ago was that?
It will be 7 years this year.
Okay.
So it feels like a different lifetime ago. and yesterday, all at the same time. So I was really fortunate because my first couple of clients came from my personal network. Once I decided that I was going to start a business, but then actually then doing it sometimes are different things, aren't they? But once I started talking to people, my first clients came from my contacts and the people that I'd known when I said, "Oh, this is what I'm doing," and and I had clients come to me that way, and then networking played a big part. I found a group that I really, really aligned to locally quite early on, so I jumped in, and in my vein of jumping in and wanting to be the best and do all that I could, I just kind of got involved with that, and that brought a lot of business, and then we just kind of built all the other kind of methods of attracting clients as we've grown. It's kind of grown with us.
That's a good story, I guess. And in terms of like all the other methods you've got of getting clients, like initially you mentioned your personal network, and then like I met you networking, so then it was like a more official network, I guess. What other things have you done to like get clients over the years?
I think networking's been a big part. We're so fortunate. We get a lot of our clients referring us. That's a really big thing that's grown. We get a lot of our clients are big advocates of us as we are of them, and our digital presence has always been a focus.
Actually, I see you popping up all the time on my social media.
Oh, good. Well, I mean, I feel like as a virtual business, we've kind of got to do that a bit better than most, haven't we?
To compensate for not having the bricks and mortar.
So we've always focused on our digital presence, and it has evolved. I think one of the things that I did wrong early on with the digital stuff was trying to be on every platform in every way, and it's exhausting, isn't it? We are now, but in those early days, you can't do it all, and if you can, you can't do it all by yourself.
So is that thing you learned there, just pick one thing and do it really well?
I think so, yeah. Which, as a multi-passionate person, is really hard to do.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's that jack of all trades, isn't it? The generalist and the specialist. And I think for us, when we were marketing our business, and also there is a pressure to be everywhere and do everything, isn't there? And I think when you're starting out and your resources are more limited, you've got to be quite selective about where you're putting your resource and your energy. That's my experience.
Hi, it's Nishi here, and before we continue with the rest of the podcast, I just want to take a few seconds to explain what we do. We're a firm of accountants and business advisors, and we are really passionate about helping people grow and scale their own businesses and achieve the lifestyle they deserve. To do this, we've created a series of resources on our website, unrelentingdrive.com. So once you've got a few minutes after this episode, it's definitely worth checking that out. And just a quick reminder, if you do enjoy this episode, just remember to like, share, follow, and subscribe. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Actually, I'm glad you mentioned the bit about just looking after your existing clients as well. That's that can be, in fact, some of the most successful people I've spoken to. They sometimes they almost feel a bit anti-marketing. They're like, why are you messing about with that stuff? It's like, all you have to do is just focus on that customer and making sure they're like blown away with the level of service. And I do kind of, I get where they're coming from. I think, but you know what? I've never like someone who's really grown their business, scaled it, even sold it. I've never like dismissed what they're saying. But I also think in certain industries, it can work better than other industries.
Yeah.
Like one of the main reasons that we really have to push the marketing as a firm for us, like for example, is because we do a lot of stuff like your normal accountants don't do. So and then we've got a lot of clients that don't use all of our services, and we could definitely go to a lot of them where the other services would be appropriate for and upsell, and we do that. But then a lot of the time, there's no, when you've created your own thing that doesn't neatly sit into any other category. We an accountant, we are for part of our business. But are we a business coach for the other? No, not really. Are we like business advisors? yeah, but what does that mean? So what we have to do through marketing, we have to like actually tell the story of the product that we're selling. And it's almost that education piece. Whereas I know, I was talking to a dentist I know, he's really successful. He built up his business. And he was like, all you have to do is just focus on that customer. Like, you know, like if someone's had a root canal treatment, phone them at 7 o'clock in the evening, just see how they're doing, or phone their family just so they know you care and they'll recommend you. And I totally agree with that. But then certain industries, like, you know, people know what a dentist does. So it is maybe the need for the marketing isn't as substantial because it's easier to get that word of mouth.
Yeah, I love that story of your dentist, and I'm going to ask for the details later. But it's it's so important, isn't it? Because when I think of my business now as well, I literally had a conversation on the way here this morning with one of our franchise partners, and I'm not going to disrespect her or our privacy or that conversation, but we were just speaking about business is about people and looking after people.
Yeah,
and if you're doing that, the rest flows. Like, we're a very whilst we run a franchise model now, which is very structured and very processed, we're always people first. We always have been. And with that, I mean, I've always naturally, you've got to look after your customers, absolutely. And we've always taken the approach with our marketing that we celebrate the people first. We're telling the stories through the people. So when we don't actually market our franchise very much, but we do advocate and storytell our people.
Yeah.
And their successes and their relationships, and that actually in turn has been the greatest way of marketing for us, because we're not selling, we're just telling stories. And I firmly believe we've all been sitting around fires sharing human stories longer than we've been looking at the data. And I can't remember who told me that. It might have even been you recently. But
I'm going to take credit, but I didn't take
credit. But no, I'm going off on a bit of a tangent, but it is about looking after people, isn't it? And I now I'm sitting here, my franchisees, they don't work for me. They're running their own business, and they're actually created my job for me. So my job is to look after them. They're my clients. And the way that we do that and the way we advocate that, they look after their people and they look after their clients, and we're all just co-creating together, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I bumped into your husband Paul, because he was subbing for the BNI. Yeah,
right, okay.
I love the magic trick he was doing with the what was that little light, and
right, yeah,
in his 60-second introduction, he was like he managed to do a magic show pretty much.
I'm biased, but he's great. Yeah,
yeah. It's how. I think you were telling the story about this to me a while ago, but how did Paul end up giving up his job and working with you?
I think he'd agree with me when I say it was the scariest, most demanding and probably stupid thing we've ever done, but equally the most exciting, fulfilling, rewarding and best thing we've ever done. So it kind of was, I'm so fortunate. He's always been my biggest support. And when I was still trying to find my way out of the depths of postnatal depression, and I said to him, I'm going to start a business, he was like, cool, you've got this. He was a bit like, what the hell's a virtual assistant? He thought I was going to like be Siri or something. He was like, what is that? But he was like, cool, let's do it. And he's always supported me. But him joining the business kind of was born out of probably another dark place, because everything had taken off so quickly. And, when I first started, I was so worried about finding clients and if I'd know how to figure things out. And actually, in reality, I had been fortunate enough to attract clients quicker than I prepared for. So I'd quickly got myself to that kind of overwhelmed. I think I'm not alone. I think I see and speak to a lot of businesses that they have that kind of that rapid growth, and then you get to that kind of, now what? I'm trying to do all the things. I'm trying to be all the things to all the people. And I'd kind of gone to him just like, I'm done. This is not why I wanted to start a business. I'm really overwhelmed and I'm stressed and I'm working more than I ever was. And I've got a little boy that I want to soak up every moment with. So I was like, I'm going to walk away, I think.
Why say you're done? Why not just do less work?
Well, I think...
Is it because you're like an all or nothing person? You can't do things at a reduced speed?
It's a good question. I think I had just been not working in alignment for too long. I'd been over serving, and things needed to recalibrate. It was like that kind of, the business roller coaster that everyone talks about. I think I just kind of got to the top. I was literally just being hurled down, and I was like, I can't deal with this. You can't think straight when you're in that pressured environment. But actually, it was conversations with him that helped me kind of recalibrate. And I remember him saying to me, well, if you want to walk away, you walk away. Your happiness and that's what this is about. That's the important thing. But he was like, look at what you've achieved without really trying. He was like, I know you've got this. And I was like, yeah, well, it's all right for you and your cushy job, and you haven't got to worry about, because it's the mental burden as well. It's not just the practical burden, is it? Especially when you are a service-based business and you want to do the very best for everybody, as well as yourself. And I was like, well, are you going to help me then? And it was kind of a little flippant comment that actually was a seed, because I realised that he was pretty miserable in his job. He was missing so much of our little boy, and he'd kind of been with me on this journey anyway. So he was like, well, maybe there's something in it. And we also realised at that point that we had very complementary skill sets. For example, he will be the first to say this, was the worst virtual assistant in the world ever. He tried it. It was like, no, this isn't going to work for me. But we took the time to explore and define what we were going to do and how we were going to work together. And it was him that was driving a lot of the growth, because he didn't want me to be in that position again. We didn't want to be in a position where I was going to give up because I was stressed. So we kind of took the time there to really try and lay some solid foundations for us.
How did you feel as a family at the time? Were you worried about money?
Oh God, yes, still am. Yeah, that was the main concern, being able to, because when I started the business, he'd got a job. He'd got a job that paid the bills. There wasn't as much financial pressure on me. But then we realised that we'd got something, and that we had got something that we could scale and we could grow and that we could shift. So I think the financial stuff was, him quitting his job was scarier. That was the scariest part, because that was really felt like that was our safety net gone. And we had to just trust in our abilities to be able to just keep going and make it work. So yeah, financial stuff was hard. But then equally, having had my second child now and having had maternity leave, the time that we've had together as a family this time around, money can't buy that.
No, you're right. That makes a lot of sense. So when Paul first joined the business, what was his first goal? Just to document everything and create processes. Is that right? I'm
going to share this with you, with your accounting head on, and I know you're not going to judge me, but Paul's first job was actually figuring out the absolute mess that was my invoicing. He was like, what have you been doing? But yeah, I had naturally kind of process mapped and started a lot of stuff anyway, because it was just ingrained in me from my previous work. So he came in and was like, he definitely helped with the kind of financial stuff. I'm not a numbers person at all. That's not my strength. So that's his. He's very process, very systems, very analytical. So he came in and was like, right, what have we got here? He kind of troubleshooted a bit the business to work out what I'd done and what was missing, where the gaps were. And we just kind of rolled with it from there.
Amazing. Okay. And then I guess once he'd fixed the invoicing,
embarrassing.
Did that mean you got a massive lump sum of money that you hadn't billed people for yet?
No, it wasn't as exciting as that. It was more like I'd invoiced like 100 people with the same invoice number and hadn't put the details on right, and it was a bit of a mess because I had never had to do that. So I was focused on just looking after my clients more.
You know what? Like my mindset is like, build something, doesn't matter how messy it is, and then fix it later on. And because there's so many people out there that can be organized and they can plan and try and create all this infrastructure before they've even got that first customer. And 99% of those people won't ever start a business. Whereas like if the majority of people can't get that first customer. Although I know you're saying you leveraged your network, but actually you leveraged the belief in your network more importantly. And there's a lot of people out there, they just can't do that because, or even if you can get that first customer, you can't fulfill that first customer because you don't have the operational bits to do it. So I think I'm a believer in that. Like, you know, when I first started this accounting firm, like there's so many things in today's perspective, looking at it, were a complete mess. And then over the years, we've improved them, we create processes, systems to deal with it. And but in the end of the day, like it's just that starting out that counts, not getting it right from day one. So that makes a lot of sense. So he like you're the person that goes out and gets work. He's the one that cleans everything up behind you.
Pretty much, yeah. Which is pretty much. It's kind of like that. It's kind of like that in our home life as well. But I love what you're saying though, because it's finding that beautiful, is it harmony or balance between action and planning, isn't it? And I know, I know so many brilliant people who, get stuck in that kind of, is it perfection phase of like, I've got to have everything perfect and everything right before I move, almost. And I know I'm the same as you. We weren't ready when our first franchisee kind of came to us in the way that she did. We weren't ready, but we were like, we're ready enough, let's lean into it. And even now we're still was your first refining.
Franchisee Sarah?
Lovely Sarah. We totally lucked out with her.
Actually, we'll go into that in a second actually. But I think what you're describing though, the planning or procrastinating, it's because people have told themselves something they don't quite believe. And this is just an observation. Maybe it's different for so many different people, but they've told themselves something they don't quite believe, and they're working up the courage to believe it, or maybe they're trying to plan enough that if they plan enough, then they'll believe it. And then eventually they'll have to make a choice. Like, do they keep on planning, or do they actually believe what they want to do? And most people, they realize actually, no, they never had belief in it but the few that do, they're like, actually, okay, look, I've worked everything out rationally based on what I know. There's no reason it shouldn't work. Let's go ahead. But I think actually that comes later on in business, not at the startup stage more often, because later on in business, when you're making that decision from whether to go from being self-employed to like a business owner, and having a team and having like a full-on brand, that's when you kind of have to make that decision a bit more. Like, but starting up, I think it's just usually people are dissatisfied with something. They sometimes they don't feel like they have anything to lose. Like even when I started this business, you know, we're almost 10 years old now, but I was in a job I was really unhappy with. But I was just unhappy with the idea of jobs. But for me, though, I know like other people do jobs really well. Like we have a great team, and I've never wanted them to. So I've never looked down on them or anything for just wanting a job, because that's really important. But there was like in terms of my own personality, there was just elements of it that didn't quite fit with employment. But like even when I gave up a salary to start my business, I still at that point didn't feel like I had anything to lose. Although, I could argue, losing a salary is something to lose, but I just was so like disparaged what I was doing that I couldn't, like even the salary, I just couldn't imagine going on for a salary. So I came to the conclusion, like, you know, I'm going to take that step. And so I think that's how people start in business. But then, the procrastination comes in trying to going from being self-employed to building up that brand and business, because it's so being self-employed, like being employed and trying to be self-employed, like, you know, it's obvious what you're unhappy with a lot of the time. You just want to be that freedom fighter. You want that freedom. But when you are self-employed, you've pretty much got most of what you want at that point. You've got the freedom in the hours. You've probably got the relationships that count. And then the next step in terms of scaling the business, it almost seems unnecessary. Like, it's, why do people scale a business? Fine, they want to. In my opinion, some people out there will say, you scale a business because you're greedy. You want it to be worth £2 million, so you can go get a yacht. I don't know. Can you buy a yacht for $2 million? Maybe.
I have no idea. Let's say you can.
Yeah, exactly. And but what kind of yacht though? It's
I know. I'm thinking
one.
About the yacht now. Yeah.
But people on the outside looking in will say, okay, well, people want to build up a business because they're greedy. They just want lots of money. They want to sell it one day. But actually, I think people in the business community where you are building up a business, they'll say, okay, well, this person's passionate about their industry and they want to help other people by creating good quality employment and opportunities. They're passionate about their solution, so they want to help other businesses or other people by giving them the ability to benefit from that solution. And they want to help more of those people than they could help just by themselves as a self-employed person.
Yeah.
And I think this... And I think to some extent, people are thinking about their pension because let's face it, like even in employment, you could have the best pension scheme in the world, but the chances are you're still going to get caught short when you retire. So really, you've got to have something else these days. Like, mindset wise, right? Our parents, well, not my parents, but a lot of people I know's parents, they tell you it's all about the pension, but they came from a generation where final salary pensions were a thing. Yeah. They still kind of are now, but they're barely worth anything. But they came from a generation where pensions were a thing, and the world's changed. And I think people who want to take that step and start scaling their business, it's not out of greed. It's about necessity. They are thinking about their future. They're thinking about their family's future. And they're thinking about all the people they want to help in the business and outside the business.
Yeah, I'd agree. And I knew early on I wanted to create a business, but I didn't know how or when or what it was going to be. But when I think of the growth that we've had, it has been people led. It like you've said, it's about how can I better serve people? How can I create? And one of the things that we didn't really factor in we didn't really factor in as much when we were laying the foundations for the franchise was that our franchisees would grow their businesses, which sounds ridiculous. I'm very aware of that. But all of a sudden we were like, okay, our franchisees are creating truly flexible working opportunities for people like us, for mums who want to work from home around the school run. And, I was like, oh, okay. Hadn't really factored that in, and then it started happening because they were growing businesses. They were brilliant. They are brilliant business people, and we have naturally attracted a lot of interest in what we do anyway, from all angles. People wanting to work with us, for us, and if you speak to Paul about this, he will come at it from a very different angle to me, which is why we work so well together, and a great example, because he's like, well, you need to have the profit so you can make the impact, and I'm like, well, I need to make the impact so I can get the profit. So we have those kind of differing opinions, but the more people that we serve, the more people we can impact, and that's where our growth was. It's like, well, I know how much my business has changed my life, my family, and I want to be able to do that with other people. Like, I want to be able to help other people achieve what we have and the transformation that we've had as a little family unit. And it's not just you're right about the generational thing. I mean, people, I believe companies who are losing out on talent because they're not embracing what the younger generation want. Nobody wants to be in an office. Who's designed to sit at a desk all day, every day, is my personal view. People want the world to keep moving and evolving. And when I think of my kids, I mean, my son's the reason that the business exists. And I want, he asks me questions sometimes like, what did you ask me the other day on school? He's like, Mummy, when you had a job, what did you do? And I kind of was like, well, there's no way that I'd be able to have done the school run quite in this way. My life would have been so different. And he's aware that his parents are growing a business. And I think, I know you've got that experience as well, I think, from your perspective. But I just think I want my kids to grow up knowing that they can achieve whatever the hell they want. It's not just the path that's laid out for you, which when I was younger, it was like you go to school, you go to university, you get a job, you work at the job, you get your good retirement. Like that was the path. And I was like, well, hang on, no, this doesn't work for me.
You know what? I reflect a lot on why schools teach people to get jobs. And I think the most cynical me would say it's because they're all part of a larger system where they want to keep the number of entrepreneurs down, and they want to keep a steady workflow force flowing up to the people that already have businesses. But I think the other side of me, which is probably still quite cynical on it, would say it's just because they're being lazy. Like it's much easier to teach someone to write a CV in the exact same format as you know what, I went to Spawn School. This was probably about 6 years ago, right? And I was helping, like I felt like doing some volunteering, so I was helping the sixth formers write their CVs.
Cool.
And the school gives them all the same CV format, right? Or it did back then. Sorry, 6 years is a long time. It gives them the exact same CV template, and then you're going to get a local business that gets like 5 of the exact same CV template, and I'm like, oh my God, what is going on here? Like, even the presentation of these kids, like experience, they're not even allowed to stand out in that presentation. Of course they're allowed to stand out. Maybe it's a test, right? You give someone a standard template and whether or not they use that standard template.
Yeah.
But I was like saying to these kids, hey, your CVs all kind of look the same.
Yeah.
And hopefully they took that on board. But I do need to. Maybe I should do a bit more volunteering or something. But
maybe
it was an interesting insight. But I think maybe the reason I think the educational system is being lazy is because it's easy to teach someone how to write a CV. Sorry, I'm not having a dig at teachers. It's probably not that easy. But but it's less easier to teach them how to deal with financial anxiety. It's probably less easier to teach them how to deal with a difficult customer.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I think it's interesting because I think, when I was at school, there was never start your own business. It's like, where do you want work experience? Where do you want this? There was never, like, no one teaches you how to do a tax return. No one teaches you that. However, I think I view that as my job for my kids, to teach them the things that school don't. Because I mean, one of our franchisees, she used to be a primary school teacher. And I know through some of the things, I mean, naturally, my son isn't the kind of kid that sits down at a desk and behaves himself at school because his parents are a bit rebellious. But I know, I mean, the schools, I don't think, it's not that you mentioned the teachers, that it's not the teachers, is it? I think it's the system that is failing the teachers. Is my personal view at the moment. But I think as a parent, I think part of my responsibility is to make sure that my kids know that it's not just one path. It's about finding your own path. And I at one point was, I mean, I'm so unemployable now. I really have to make the business work because I couldn't get a job. Well, I really don't think I could get a job. However,
you're right. It's not about you, but for me as well.
I couldn't. I wouldn't know where to start, even with a generic CV. But it's everybody. It's individual journeys, isn't it? I really value every single good, bad, everything in between experience I had employed, and everyone that I have worked for and with, I've gained so much. And I think that's what it's all about. And it's being the person you needed, right? That's kind of like, I try and aspire to be the business leader that I needed when I was younger. I try and be the careers advisor to my kids that I needed when I was younger. And I think that's collectively how we carry on making an impact, right?
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest things for me is like apprenticeships, because I think that's definitely an opportunity to make an impact quite early on, because actually you're catching people at a point where they could stay in more education and learn more about just having a job, but actually then they come into an apprenticeship and then we teach them, hey, you've got a job now, but they also get that insight into the commercial awareness, like how businesses run as well, because then if they get that insight early on enough, that's the kind of insight a lot of people traditionally wouldn't have got until they were like, late 20s. Whereas if we can give them that insight early enough, like we've got one person who's just finishing their apprenticeship at the moment, they're like, I really want to start my own business.
Amazing.
So yeah, and it is good, because then I guess, but that's, if he hadn't been doing what we do in this environment, maybe he would have taken another 10 years on top of that to realize that. So there is, but then, the caveat to that is a lot of what I learned in my career before, because I was 29 when I started this business, so I'm 39 this year. A lot of what I learned in my career up to now, actually, I do still use it for our clients, and a lot of the techniques and the business model we built, and it is based on large industry finance, which we've made available to small businesses. So I wouldn't have been able to do that without that experience. And I do talk about being unhappy in jobs, but actually I also learned some really I had some good jobs actually before I left, and I learned some, but I had to work so hard. I was working up to 8 or 9 o'clock in the evenings, coming in early, sometimes even working weekends, which is all the stuff I got to do when I started my own business, ironically.
It's funny, isn't it? They say that, like, you get to just choose which hours you work when you have business. Yeah. But it's different though, isn't it? When you're working, because when you're working for yourself, and I see this in our franchisees when they come on board, like it takes a while to kind of shift that employee mindset and put the entrepreneur hat on almost. And when you are, I mean, I noticed this when I first started. I was like, well, hang on a minute. I'd always been salaried. It didn't matter how hard I worked or how many hours I put in, I got the same output in terms of money. And I remember having this realization. I was like, hang on a minute, I can earn more. Like, that was a real shift for me. But then when you're doing it for yourself, it's different. And when I know the fulfillment for me still now is a huge part, and that when you can see the impact that you're having on other people, which I found when I was a small business serving small businesses, that the impact that your work has, it was so much clearer to me. And that kept driving me, because when you're in large environments, big corporate offices, you can easily get lost. And you're not always clear on the impact of what you're doing sometimes. It can feel a bit thankless. And that's my personal experience of working in larger companies. That was a big driver for me. I've gone off on another tangent as well. I don't know.
No, actually,
I don't know where we were, but it felt meaningful.
To be fair, no, it's we were talking about why people make an impact and why they want to make an impact, and we briefly covered why the school system doesn't always give people the skills they need to become happy, and then we were talking about how our businesses give people that opportunity. So you mentioned your son, the best thing you could do for him is give him your life lessons, and that's also,
he won't listen to them though, right? Because that's because they don't, do they?
I'm an incredibly slow learner. Someone will have to tell me something like 10 to 20 times before I finally take it on board. But when I take something on board, it sticks. It becomes ingrained.
Yeah.
And maybe your son's a bit like that. You know what? Just to add to what you're saying about in terms of he can really benefit from what you've learned, and that's amazing, because I want my kids to do the same. we've got a really cool client called Cheryl Salmon, and she's like an ex head teacher at like a private school. And she wrote a book, and it's a really cool book, and I've got it. I haven't read it cover to cover yet, but I've read bits of it. And like the book is essentially called "How to Give Your Kids a Private Education for Free," and the book essentially teaches you all the differences between what a private school does and what a state school does. And one of the key differences that I noticed in that book is just like, the power of networking. Private schools teach you how to network.
Really?
Yeah, and this is one of the bits where I kind of butt heads with my wife with, because she's like, oh, she always wants to keep like social gatherings and stuff minimalistic, and what I do too. I'm not like, we don't have extravagant parties or anything, but I'm like, when it's anything to do with our daughter, I'm just like, hey, make sure you're inviting the right friends or the right people. Sorry, that sounds like, what I'm saying is, because my daughter's only 4, like, yeah, we need to, almost 5, we just need to put that extra, and she's got speech difficulties, so she can't always explain to us who her friends are. So what I'm trying to help my wife understand is like, make sure we've identified who her friends actually are. And then make sure we're inviting the right friends. So we're not trying to social engineer or anything.
Yeah.
But even at that age, I just want to get through to my wife. Like, it's important for us to, our daughter might not be able to really manage her own friend network, but I want to make sure that she can, or we're supporting her on that. But actually the power of networking is incredibly important. I talked to our team about it as well. We've sent them out networking in the past. Although we do it when we can, things do get busy sometimes, but in terms of your son, it makes sense. Like, you're an amazing networker. Like, I see you in so many places. You got that reputation. So actually, just being able to pass that on to him, that's more than like most schools will ever do anyway.
It's funny, isn't it? Because I've experienced a couple of people take their children networking.
Really?
And yeah, well, I mean, I must confess now that just last week, or was it this week? I don't even know. We did take my daughter networking, and she's 18 months, and she works a room. She loves it. She's like, oh, people. Once upon a time, I would have cared what people think, but that's the way that it worked out for us that day. There was no one to look after her, and we still wanted to go, and we felt that we could. She's a very people person, but I've seen people take their children networking, and I've seen these young people stand up and give a pitch, and it's blown me away, because I just think, gosh, as an adult, the first time I went networking, I couldn't even get my name out. I was that scared of speaking publicly about myself. Like, I hadn't had much experience of it, and I was that terrified. But to see kind of young people standing up and just be like, it really blew me away. So I fully intend my son to be coming along in the networking scene with me when he's a little bit calmer. He's 7 and always covered in mud and climbing trees. So when he's maybe he's a bit older, I'll be bringing him along with me, because it's important, isn't it?
Absolutely. So what made you decide to start the franchise? Like, could you and Paul have made enough money, him running the back end, you fulfilling a lot of the like VA work? Also, like, why not bring on staff? Why start a franchise?
Good questions. So we definitely could have sustained. We could have took staff on. We did start building a team, but when we were really like, it was Paul that kept coming back to the franchise model as being one that ticked all of our boxes. We were quite clear on what we wanted to do, and I was quite clear on, for me, it was impact, and the more people that we could support, the better. And I had also, got my personal fulfillment. I wanted to be able to coach and mentor and train, and that was the stuff that I was really passionate about and really good at. So I wanted to be able to do all of that. So we just kind of we're pulling it all together, and Paul was like, look, you can do all of this in a franchise model. We can shape it. But I had a lot of misconceptions about what franchising was. I thought that it was, for massive companies like Subway and McDonald's, and I thought it was a bit of a pyramid scheme and someone got ripped off. And I thought, I just didn't have a very positive perception of what franchising was. And the more I educated myself, the more I thought, well, there's people out there that must feel the same, and must have misconceptions. And actually, this is one of the ways we can continue to serve. We've hit points where the challenges we've had too many clients and not enough people to take care of them. And this is a really sustainable, organic way of scaling and serving everyone in the process, creating jobs for people, creating, supporting people with all the elements of starting their business, and then also supporting our clients and their families. And it was the kind of that possibility that I think led us to really continue with our franchise path. We could have done all of that probably if we'd have employed a team and done it that way, but that almost seemed a bit too safe for us, I think. Maybe I don't know.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, I mean, I think in the past I've had like preconceptions around franchising, because I've seen people that have been really heavily ripped off by franchising, but then I've met some good quality franchise businesses since then, which show me actually a lot of the franchises are run by people who actually just want to make a difference. They do care. And it's like, it's the best way to help as many people as possible with the resources they have. How'd you get your first franchisee? Sarah, is it?
Yeah, my favourite story with Sarah. So we were in at the stage where Paul was like, okay, we need to explore this. So we got a business advisor through, I don't know what they're called now, but they were
Semlep.
It was Semlep. Yeah, I don't know if they're still Semlep or if they've rebranded.
Enterprise Partnership.
Something like that. Amazing support function. And we had a business advisor, and they were supporting us in kind of the next stage is shaping, seeing if we could access funding. We'd got we were looking at franchise consultants to support us. We were looking at loads of stuff. So our business advisor was really helping us with that. And it was a great support to us. And it was at the end of that relationship, long story short, we were like, there wasn't really anything available that was going to fit what we needed. So we were just like, we're going to just crack on and see where we go. And it was at that point that our business advisor turned around and said, I want to be your first franchisee. Okay. And that was Sarah Damani. And I literally spat my coffee at her. I was like, what? Because we had such a open relationship. I'd been fully transparent with who I am and where we were and where we were going. And I remember her flippantly saying to me, like, I'm a business advisor. I deal with small businesses day in, day out.
Yeah.
Something would be wrong if I didn't want to start a business. I was like, fair comment. And then she said, you guys have made so much progress in such a short space of time. I can see you're passionate. Like I just everything started coming together. And we were both kind of, we're not really ready, but for her, I think she's had a massive influence on the franchise. And for her, the risk versus the reward of being our first franchisee was totally weighted for her. So she jumped in, and here we are.
How many franchisees later?
We have 7 in total now.
Okay, amazing. Yeah, 7. Yeah. And okay, yeah, and how many people are in the Alchemy team altogether? Like, because some of them have got staff now.
Yes,
haven't they?
Yeah, our head count's sitting about 20 at the moment.
Oh, that's really good. Okay. Amazing, yeah. And how far apart are these? Where are they geographically located?
So our kind of furthest, we've got lovely Laura in Glasgow, and is furthest north. We've got Chorley. Our furthest south is our newest franchisee, who's in Buckinghamshire. So we're not furthest south. So we've got one in London as well. So we've got a good spread. It was our intention to focus in Northamptonshire and then grow out. That was because that's where our brand and our concentration, our network, and that's where our strength was, but it just hasn't worked that way.
Yeah. How are you picking up people in Glasgow, for example?
I have no idea. No. Yes. She found us. This is it. We have a remarkable ability to attract good people. And she was looking at she was looking into virtual assistant franchises, and she really connected and resonated with us. And
is that just like an SEO thing in that case? Like you came up on a Google search?
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay.
Yeah. And it's interesting because our newest franchisee wasn't looking for a franchise at all, but she knew she'd got a fire in her belly for a business.
Yeah.
And I probably shouldn't admit this publicly, but she did find another virtual assistant franchise, didn't connect with the brand, but then was like, I like this concept. And then she found us. So, and it was actually, she's obviously been doing a lot of homework, as anyone should if they're considering any aspect of business. But it was one of our client video testimonials that pushed her over the line, because she saw the relationship and the impact that we have with our clients, and she'd seen the video and was like, yeah, no, this is for me. So we're doing her training at the moment. And she said something so profound to me on our recent training session. She's got friends in business, and she knows she's got a very, very good awareness of business. She's got a good commercial acumen, and she said this is, she's like, this has taken some of my friends 5 years or so to get to this point in business, and she's only a couple of weeks in.
Yeah, amazing.
Just with the foundations that she's laying, the training and the support she's getting. And she was like, that's why I wanted to join a franchise. That's why I wanted to join you. And I was like, yeah. And that's why I wanted to do it.
And what would you say the hardest bit about setting a franchise up is?
Setting it up. I mean, so many difficult things. I think the recruitment has been really tricky.
So the recruitment of
because it
franchisees?
Is, yeah, because it is still recruitment and the marketing of that. I think it's that balance, or that place that you mentioned earlier, between having everything ready and right, and having those solid foundations in, and acting and moving. I think it's that's been the trickiest bit, knowing where that is. Like, am I ready enough? Is this ready enough? Is this proven enough? Is this tested enough? I think that concept of enoughness is definitely been a challenge.
Perfect, the enemy of the good, or no, perfect, the enemy of the great.
That sounds profound, something like that. But it's knowing when is right, because you're never going to have it. I mean, we're still constantly refining.
Yeah.
And if we'd waited until it was perfect and we were ready, then we wouldn't have any franchisees at all, or we wouldn't have. And then you know, in any business, you're evolving and you're experiencing new and different things, and you're refining and you're going back. So I think that's been the hardest thing, finding that place between readiness and action is probably the only thing I can think of.
Yeah, absolutely, makes a huge amount of sense. Okay, and like I guess you kind of, you know, you helped me understand earlier on, there was a point before you started the franchise where you almost felt like giving up, and then Paul got involved, and then you grew it together. Like, has there been any points like during the franchise when you set that up, you felt like giving up?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think though I realised I hit this point where I was so far from my comfort zone I couldn't even see it, and I was scared. I've hit that point a couple of times, but I'm fortunate that I've got Paul, and actually, I think I said earlier, I work for my franchisees. They have kept me going when I've hit those points of like, what am I doing? I can't do this anymore. Or I've reminded myself why I am doing it and their achievements, and then equally, you know, having had the baby and having some time out, and there's been loads of times that I've mentally given up, but I've always had the support and the motivation to keep going, and I'm really grateful for that.
That makes a lot of sense. I think, definitely. That, I mean, setting up a franchise, like, you know, I can imagine one of the biggest objections you get would be like, why do I need a franchise? I could just go get a laptop and a phone and become a VA myself. Like, how do you deal with that objection? Oh,
I love that. It's so funny, isn't it? Because, you know, from my perspective, all of our franchisees could have gone and started their own business. They're incredibly remarkable people.
Yeah.
There was absolutely no doubt that they could start their own business, but they didn't want to. And that's a clear differentiator. I think a lot of people don't understand the depth of I know I didn't. When you're starting out, you don't understand the depth of anything, do you? There's an element of naivety when you start anything new.
You can always create a to-do list, but actually it doesn't.
Yeah.
It's not about the things you got to do. It's about the way you feel about them.
And it's the person that you've got to become as well. And some people just don't see the benefit. And I don't. I don't worry about those people. If they don't understand what we are and the way we work, then it's not my job to convince them. We do get a lot of people come to us who have started or have tried or are struggling. I know the value in the support, but then equally, it's an interesting thing because our business model's proven profitable. We teach, we train, we support, we guide, we coach, all of the ways that we know work. So if you do the work, it's like so we give them a recipe book and they've got to make the cake. So I hear a lot like, oh, haven't got the money, or, I'm not sure. And that's always a big thing, which it is. It is a big thing, but it's an investment. And if I'm laying it out, you've got to take the steps, you've got to do the action. It's not really about the money, it's about the belief that they have in themselves to take that action.
Yeah.
So I don't try and convince anyone. I don't try and overcome objections. I think the people that get it are our people.
Yeah.
And they're the ones that are setting themselves up for success.
Yeah, I can definitely see the pros and cons. I think one of the biggest pros.
It's not for everyone.
But yeah, I mean, just having that network off the bat, having the mentor, I've paid thousands of pounds, tens of thousands of pounds of business coaching over the years. Like, I guess with a franchise, you're getting that up front, although you are paying a fee to join a franchise. But there can be, definitely a lot of benefits as well.
Yeah, well, we worked out how much we had spent. I mean, if you're starting a business, you've got to invest at some point in yourself, in your brand, everything. And when we totaled it up, we were like, we should be charging a lot more for our franchise. And it's a time and energy saving as well, to be able to kind of have a ready-made brand, have your ready-made processes, have everything that's kind of laid out for you. The whole reason we do that is because we want our franchisees to start earning money and start serving their clients as quick as possible.
Yeah.
So, but then some people want that part of the process. They want to create their own brand. They want to do all of that stuff. And that's okay. That's okay. There's enough for everyone, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's absolutely amazing. Actually, one thing I did notice about the good franchises I've seen is they tend to have a slightly lower setup cost, and then they make more off the royalties and I think that puts people at ease, because then they're like, okay, well, this franchisor has to make it work, because then they're not going to get that. And I think the franchises I've seen that didn't work so well is where they just got this really high upfront setup cost. And then they're not too worried about the royalties. And then that's where you kind of guess you're thinking is that just because they don't have faith in the long-term profitability of that franchise themselves? But it's definitely interesting. Well, Suzy, that sounds absolutely amazing. Ultimately, I've just got a couple of questions left, really. So what's next for the franchise business? How far do you want to take it?
Ooh, good question. Well, I'm kind of only just back, if you like, from maternity leave. So the focus is retention and growth of our people, first and foremost. The franchisees that we already have, supporting them as best we can. And we are focused on sustainable growth. So really being selective about who we're bringing into the business, and growing it that way.
Okay, absolutely amazing. And I guess finally, so what bit of advice would you give to someone starting out?
Oh, don't do it. No, I'm joking. I think
that's what Mark said yesterday, and then he said, just joking.
Just joking.
And then we edited it out.
No, I think one of the things that I'm always constantly reminded of is that learning to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. But equally, I think believing and trusting in your abilities and almost not taking all the advice. Because everybody's got an opinion.
That's a very good point. Yeah,
Everyone's got an opinion. And I know I fell victim to taking on too much advice and not having that check-in with myself. And I think that's an important part of the process.
I think that's a really good point. Yeah, the people I really want to take advice from, they don't willingly give it. Like, you've really got to got to encourage them to give them your opinion, their opinion. Whereas like a kind of people you don't always want to take advice from, they're there all day long giving you advice. But the second you give them a little bit left, their ears are closed. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. I think that's a very, very good bit of advice. Well, Suzy, I mean, I guess we didn't really get to cover much about your coaching business in the podcast, because we got so much really good content on the franchise side. But you do also have a personal life coaching business as well. And I'm sure anyone watching this, if they wanted to get a hold of you about either of those businesses, what's the best way?
Connect with me on LinkedIn. It's probably the best way, but all my links and details are on there, and I'm guessing we can put them in show notes and stuff as well.
Yeah, so, absolutely. What do we call it? The description. That's
there
it.
We go. Yeah,
we'll definitely add those in.
Thank you.
Okay, amazing. Suzy, that's been great to have you on. And everyone, you're watching the Unrelenting Drive podcast, and I'll see you at the next episode.